My mother said you never really know who's sitting at your counter, so you pour every cup like it matters. For 14 years, I thought it was just a nice thing waitresses tell each other. That night, I learned it was the truest thing anyone ever said to me. I was standing in a private room at Fiorelli's, the nicest restaurant in town, still in my apron, with the coffee stain on the hip and a pen behind my ear. I had come straight from the diner, 30 minutes late to my own anniversary dinner. 20 years married to Griffin Callahan. There were 14 people at that long table, and at Griffin's right hand, in a green dress, was Whitney Dahl, the office manager from Callahan Auto. I was still standing at the end of the table when Griffin lifted his glass. "To people who made something of their lives," he said. Then he looked down that long table at me and said the thing I will hear for the rest of my life. He said, "Waiting tables is a job any idiot could do. She pours coffee. Whitney runs a whole office." The table laughed. That was the worst part. It was not a cruel laugh. It was an easy, comfortable laugh, the laugh of people who agreed with him. Whitney reached up and straightened Griffin's tie, the way a wife does, and she laughed too. And I stood there. I did not sit down. I set the little gift I had brought for him on the corner of the table, turned around, and walked out through the main dining room in my apron with the pen still behind my ear. I drove home in the uniform he was ashamed of. I did not know yet that it was about to become the most valuable thing I owned. If you have ever stood in a room full of people and watched someone you loved treat what you do, what you are, like it was nothing, take a second and subscribe. My name is Nora Callahan, and I need to take you back to the beginning, because you cannot understand what happened at that counter unless you understand the years that came before it. I am 45 years old, and I have poured coffee at the Bluff Street Diner in Dubuque for 14 years. Dubuque sits right on the Mississippi, in the northeast corner of Iowa, where the river makes the bluffs that give my diner its name. It is a river town. Barge crews and truckers pass through, driving between Chicago and nowhere, and the same men have sat at my counter every morning for a decade. I need to be honest about what I mean when I say I poured coffee, because my husband made it sound like all I did was hold a pot. The diner belongs, on paper, to a man named Del Weber, 79 years old. He opened it in 1971, but his knees went, and then his wife passed, and somewhere in the last 8 years he stopped coming in most days at all. So I ran it. I do not say that to sound proud. I say it because it is the plain fact. I did the ordering. I made the schedule. I hired the new girls and trained them. I knew which regular was recovering from surgery and needed his eggs a certain way, and which one had lost his job and was nursing a single cup for 2 hours because he did not want to go home and tell his wife yet, and I kept his cup full and never put it on the check. 14 years. That diner ran on me, and everybody who ate there knew it, even if the name on the door said Weber. I met Griffin Callahan when I was 23. He was a few years older, and he had just taken over Callahan Auto from his father, a used car lot on the highway out toward the interstate, full of trucks and sedans with prices soaped onto the windshields. Griffin inherited it, and he walked through this town like it made him a king. And in the beginning, I will tell you the truth, he was wonderful, tall and easy, the kind of man who made you feel like you were the only person in the room. Back then I was waiting tables at a different place, and Griffin used to come in at the end of my shift and wait for me and tip like a fool. He told his friends I was the prettiest girl in 3 counties. He said his mother had waited tables when he was small, before the dealership took off, and he respected a woman who was not afraid of a long day on her feet. I believed him. I married him when I was 24, and for a few years, it was good. I want to plant something here, because it matters later, and I did not understand at the time that it mattered at all. About 4 years into my time at the diner, a man started coming in. The first morning, he stood outside the front window a long time before he came in, like he was counting the change in his pocket and coming up short. He took the seat at the very end of the counter, by the wall, the one nobody wants. His coat was torn at the shoulder. His boots had come apart at the toe, and he had wrapped them with tape. He smelled like a man who had been sleeping outdoors because he had been. He ordered the smallest thing on the menu, a side of toast, and counted out coins to pay for it, and I watched him not have enough. The other waitresses, the cooks, even Dell on one of his rare mornings would have decided a man like that was trouble. Someone who would sit 3 hours and scare the regulars, and found little ways to make him feel unwelcome until he left. I did not do that. I do not tell you this to sound like a saint, because I am not one. I just could not do it. My mother raised me in a house where money was thin, and she used to feed men off our back porch during the layoff years at the plant, and she used to say that same thing to me. You never really know who's sitting at your counter, so you pour every cup like it matters. So I put a full plate of the day's special in front of that man, and a cup of coffee, and told him it was on the house. He tried to say no. I told him the cook had made too much, and it would go in the trash otherwise, which was a lie, and we both knew it, and he ate. His name was Ellis Kovach, and he came in almost every day for the better part of a year, and I fed him. The day's special, whatever it was, coffee, and toward the end a slice of pie. I never once let him feel like a charity case. I learned his name the second week and used it every day. Good morning, Ellis. Cold one out there, Ellis. I saved that bad seat by the wall for him because he liked to sit with his back to the room. When the regulars grumbled, I told them Ellis was my guest, and because they knew me, they left it alone. Ellis talked a little over that year. He told me he had lost a business out west and lost his wife with it, and come back this way because he had grown up near here and did not know where else to point himself. One gray morning near the end, he told me he was going to try to make something of his life again. He said it the way a man says a thing he is not sure he believes. And then one day he did not come in, and the next day he did not come in. I was glad, because I knew he had gone to try. I kept his seat empty a while out of habit, and then a new regular took it, and the years rolled over the memory of him the way the river rolls over everything. I did not think about Ellis Kovach for a long time. I had my own life to lose. Because somewhere in those same years, my husband stopped looking at me the way he had at that first table. It did not happen all at once. There was no single day I could point to. It came in small, calm sentences, spaced far enough apart that each one seemed like nothing on its own. The first one I remember, we were getting dressed for a country club Christmas party for the Auto Dealers Association. I had put on a good dress, and I was happy. And Griffin looked at me in the mirror and said, "You are not going to tell people you are still at the diner, right? Just say you work in hospitality." He said it lightly, fixing his cuff, and I laughed because I thought he was half joking, and I did not understand until much later that he was not. After that, they came more often. He started calling it your little job. He started introducing me at his events as my wife Nora, and then changing the subject fast before anyone could ask what I did, steering it away like a man closing a door. The dealership was doing well then, or he said it was, and Griffin liked to spend like a big man. New trucks every year, a boat he used 4 times. He wanted people to see the most successful man in the room, and a wife who came home smelling like fryer grease with tired feet and a name tag did not fit that picture. That is about when Whitney Dahl came to work at Callahan Auto as office manager, running the paperwork and the books. She was polished the way Griffin wanted his life to be polished. She talked about the dealership like it was a corporation instead of a lot with soap on the windshields. And Griffin started coming home with Whitney's ideas, what Whitney thought they should do. I was not stupid. I felt the shape of it before I could see it. But I told myself I was being insecure, that a man is allowed to respect the woman who runs his office. I poured my coffee and ran my diner and told myself it was fine. One night I came home late from a double, tired all the way through, and Griffin was at the kitchen island with his laptop. I told him I was beat, that we had been slammed, that Dell had not shown, and I had done the deposit myself. He did not look up from the screen. He said, "Nora, I need you to think about winding the diner down. It is time you stopped." And then, in the words that went in like a splinter, "It is embarrassing." I have got guys asking me why my wife is slinging hash when I am doing what I am doing. I told him it was not slinging hash. I told him I ran that place. I told him Dell could not open the doors without me. And Griffin gave me a small, patient smile, the kind you give a child who has said something sweet and dumb, and he said, "Nora, anybody can carry a plate." Around then is when I started to notice Whitney in the details. I would call the dealership for Griffin, and she would answer, and there would be a small, cool pause before she put me through. She started coming to the events on Griffin's side of the room, and once, at a summer barbecue at a commissioner's house, I passed the two of them by the drink table, and I was not meant to hear it, but I heard Whitney say to my husband, "Lo, you know she is holding you back, right? A man in your position." And Griffin did not disagree. He did not say a word to defend me. He just looked into his glass. That was the summer before the anniversary dinner. That was the summer I stopped being able to lie to myself and started, most nights, lying awake instead. But the dinner was only where it became public. The real bottom came in the weeks after, when the thing that had been happening in my house all along finally showed itself in the numbers. Because here is what I did not know, standing in that private room at Fiorelli's in my apron. Callahan Auto was drowning. Griffin had been hiding it for the better part of a year. The lot was full of trucks he had paid too much for and could not move, and he had fallen behind on the floor plan debt with the bank that financed his inventory. The interest was eating him alive. The big man in town was running out of road. And Whitney, the one who ran the books, had a plan for how he would survive it. Move everything still solid, everything still liquid to shore up the dealership. And the thing still solid, with a steady paycheck every 2 weeks and no debt attached to it, was me. I found out the way you find out these things, by a small door closing that you did not know was a door. I went to the pharmacy for a prescription I had taken for years, and the girl at the counter told me my insurance had been declined. She thought it was a glitch. It was not. When I got home and made the calls, I learned that my health insurance, on a plan Griffin had set up years ago, had been canceled. Not lapsed, canceled deliberately 6 weeks earlier. The paperwork had been submitted by the office at Callahan Auto, and it had Whitney's initials on it. Then I went to move some money from our joint account to cover it, and it was nearly empty. 20 years of a shared account, swept down to almost nothing, moved into the business, into an account I was not on. When I asked Griffin about it, standing in our kitchen with the pharmacy receipt still in my hand, he did not even have the decency to look ashamed. He said, "The business needs it right now. You have got your tips. You will be fine." As if my tips, the singles I counted at the end of a double shift, were the loose change of the household, and everything real belonged to him and Whitney and the lot. And then he said the thing that told me exactly where I stood. He said, "Whitney reorganized everything. She knows what she is doing. You should be grateful somebody in this family finally does." In this family. He said it standing in the kitchen he shared with his wife of 20 years. I want you to picture it, because I lived it. 44 years old, no insurance, a joint account with $40 in it, my name on nothing, not the house, which was Griffin's from before the marriage, not the business, which was Callahan. My husband had stood up in a restaurant and told a table of important people that any idiot could do what I did. And then he had, quietly, with another woman's initials on the forms, made me the emergency fund he was allowed to spend. And every one of those mornings, I got up before dawn, drove to the diner, unlocked the door, made the first pot of coffee, and poured every cup like it mattered. Because it was the one place I was still somebody. Where old Mr. Petrakis lit up when I came around the counter, the bargemen called me by name, and the new girl watched how I did it so she could learn. I was at the lowest point of my life, still behind that counter, doing the only thing my husband thought was worth nothing. I did not know the counter was about to save me, but it was. It was a Tuesday in the fall. I remember because Tuesdays were slow and the diner was near empty at 2 in the afternoon. Just me and one cook and a couple of regulars in a corner booth, when the front door opened and a man in a good gray suit walked in. He was clean and pressed, and he moved like a man used to rooms turning to look at him. I had my back to the door, filling the sugar jars, and I heard him sit down. At the end of the counter, the seat by the wall. The bad seat nobody wants, the one with your back to the room. I turned around with the coffee pot already in my hand, the way I have turned around 10,000 times, and I said, "Coffee?" And I looked at him, and he was looking at me like a man who had seen a ghost. I did not know him at first. A clean-shaven man in a gray suit, silver coming in at the temples, a good watch. And then he smiled, and something in the shape of it, something tired underneath the good clothes, turned a key in me, and I set the coffee pot down very slowly, because my hand had started to shake. "Ellis," I said. He stood up off that stool and said, "I did not think you would remember me." I told him I had kept his seat empty for a month after he stopped coming in. I do not know why that was the first thing I said, but it was true. He put his hand flat on the counter and sat back down, and for a second this composed man in his expensive suit could not talk at all. Then he told me, in pieces, where the years had taken him. He had gone west, gotten himself dry, gotten himself work. One job became a better one. A man he trusted brought him in on a deal, and he had learned he was good at seeing which small businesses had a good bone and which were rotten under the paint. He was an investor now, not a rich beyond imagining man, a regional one, part of a small group out of the Quad Cities that put money into local businesses banks had stopped believing in. Dealerships, restaurants, family shops on their last legs. And that, he said, was actually why he was in Dubuque that week. He had come to look at a used car lot that had come to his group for a rescue, drowning in floor plan debt, run by a man who had borrowed against everything he had. The dealership was Callahan Auto. I did not say anything for a moment, and Ellis, who is a sharp man, watched my face, and he said, "Nora, what is it?" So I told him. Standing behind my counter, in my apron, I told a man I had fed for free 10 years ago that the dealership he had come to save belonged to my husband. I told him about Whitney, about the insurance and the empty account and the anniversary dinner and the toast, and it all just came out because Ellis Kovach was the one person in the world who had never once made me feel small. He listened to the whole thing without touching his coffee, and when I was done, he was quiet a while. And then he said something I will keep for the rest of my life. He said, "Nora, when I had nothing, when I was a man, everybody in this town wanted to shoo off a stool. You are the only person who treated me like a human being. You fed me for a year and never once let me feel like less than a man. I remembered your name for 10 years, and the only person who was ever truly kind to me was the woman pouring coffee." I did not know what to say to that. So I refilled his cup, because that is what I do. The next morning, Ellis had his meeting with Griffin. I was not there, but I heard exactly how it went, because it went through this town like a spring flood. Griffin had put on his best suit. Whitney was there, with her folders and her projections, ready to run the room. They walked in expecting an out-of-town money man they could charm into a rescue, and instead they got Ellis, who had already looked under the paint. He listened to Whitney's whole presentation, and then, they say, he closed his folder and told Griffin his group would not be putting $1 into Callahan Auto. Griffin pushed. He talked about his father, about the Callahan name in this town, about how much the lot could turn around with just a little runway. And Ellis let him finish, and then he said, "And this part I know is true because 2 different people in the building told me the same words. I know exactly who you are, Mr. Callahan. And I know exactly who your wife is. I have eaten at her counter. You do not have anything here I want to invest in." Whitney tried to save it, standing up about the fundamentals, the market, what she had reorganized. And Ellis looked at her and asked her one question. He asked whose signature was on the cancellation of Nora Callahan's health insurance. And the room went quiet, and Whitney did not have an answer that helped her. And that, I think, was the moment Griffin finally understood that whatever he thought he had built with that woman was made of nothing. But that was not the part that changed my life. Ellis refusing to save my husband, that was justice. And I would be lying if I said it did not feel like justice. But justice does not pay for insurance. Justice does not put your name on anything. What changed my life came a week later, because of Del Weber. Old Del had been feeling it too. 79, no wife, no children who wanted the diner, a body that would not let him work anymore. He had decided to sell, and he did not know who on earth would buy a little Rivertown diner. He said as much one morning at the counter to me and the regulars and, as it happened, to Ellis, who had come back in for breakfast. And Ellis, who had spent a year of his life sitting at the end of that very counter watching who really ran the room, made Del an offer for the diner. And then he turned to me, and he made me an offer too. He did not give me the diner. I want to be clear about that, because that is not what happened, and the difference matters. Ellis Kovac does not give things away. He told me so himself, smiling. What he did was tell me his group would put up the money for me to buy the Bluff Street diner from Del, and that I would own it and run it and pay them back out of what it earned, and that he considered it, in his words, one of the safest bets he had made in years. And when I asked him why me, he did not talk about the free plates I gave him 10 years ago. He said the kindness got him in the door, that it was why he was at my counter at all, but it was not why he was betting on me. He said, "Nora, I spent a year watching you run this place while a man who barely showed up had his name on the sign. I have looked at 100 businesses, and I know a good operator when I see one. You are the least risky thing I have looked at all year. I am not doing you a favor. I am making money. That is the part I need you to hear, if you hear nothing else." The kindness opened the door. But he bet on me because I was good at it, because for 14 years I had run a business the world had decided did not count, and I had run it well, and one man had finally been paying attention. If you have ever been the person nobody thought to look at twice, the one holding a whole thing together while somebody else took the credit, stay with me because I need you to see how it ended. And if any part of my story has reached you, leave a comment and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. I own the Bluff Street Diner now. I bought it from Del that winter, with the backing from Ellis's group, and I run it as the owner and managing partner. Del comes in on Sundays and lets me pour his coffee and tells the new girls that I was always the one who really ran the place. It clears somewhere around $4,000 to $4,500 a month after everything is paid, which is not a fortune, but it is mine, and it is steady, and no one can cancel it with their initials on a form. The first thing I did was call Marla, the girl whose shift I had covered the night of the anniversary dinner, the reason I walked into Fiorelli's late and in my apron. She had lost a second job and needed the hours. I hired her back and gave her a raise because I remembered exactly what it is to be a woman who works hard for a place that does not see her. I kept the regulars. Mr. Petrakis still gets his eggs the way he likes them. The barge crews still come through. The bad seat at the end by the wall, I keep it open more often than I need to, and I do not always let myself think about why. And I had the sign painted. It used to say, "Weber's out front," faded almost to nothing after half a century. I had it redone. It says, "Bluff Street Diner" now, big and clear, and underneath, in smaller letters, N. Callahan, proprietor. Callahan. The name he was ashamed to have standing at the end of that table. It is on the door now, on a business that I own, the one thing in my life that no one gave to me and no one can take away, and every morning I unlock it and see my own name on the glass. Callahan Auto closed in the spring. Without an investor, the floor plan debt finally caught up to Griffin, and the bank took the inventory, and the lot on the highway sat empty with the soap still on a few of the windshields until somebody painted over the sign. The big man in town was not a big man anymore. Whitney Dahl left the way that kind of person always leaves, the moment the money is gone. She had reorganized everything, canceled everything, moved everything, and when there was nothing left to run, there was nothing left to keep her, and she went to Cedar Rapids to run some other man's office, I am told. I do not spend much time thinking about them. I used to think the day the tables turned would feel like triumph, like I would want him to walk in and choke on it. But it does not feel like that. Griffin came in once, a few months ago. He sat at the far end of the counter, not the wall seat, the other end, older and smaller than I remembered, and he ordered coffee. And here is the truest thing I can tell you about who I have become. I poured it like it mattered. I put a full cup in front of my ex-husband, and I did not say anything cruel, and I did not need to, because his cup was full and his lot was empty, and my name was on the glass over his shoulder. He drank it and left a few dollars on the counter and went, and I bussed the cup and got back to work. The man he begged for money ate free at my counter once for a year when he had nothing. I never knew who he'd become. That was the whole point. I only knew he was a person who was hungry, and my mother had taught me what you do when a person is hungry and sitting at your counter. Today, I write this from the small office in the back of the diner, between the lunch rush and the dinner rush, with the smell of coffee coming through the door and Marla laughing at something a regular said. I am the boss I always was. Now the sign just agrees with me. My mother said you never really know who's sitting at your counter, so you pour every cup like it matters. She was right. A torn coat at the end of the counter became the reason my name is on the door, and I still pour every single cup like it matters, every morning for every stranger who walks in out of the cold. Because it does matter. It always did. It was the only thing that ever really did. If my story touched you, leave a comment and tell me what you felt. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. I will see you in the next one.